Okay, this is Algebra 1, Lesson 2.2, addition of real numbers. Two goals. We're adding real numbers using the number line. It says or addition rules. We'll do and addition rules because we're going to learn both ways. And then we're going to use them in real life problems, beginning on page 72 in the text. Example number 1 is adding three real numbers. This is using the number line. So you have three different numbers. A lot of students can do everything we do in algebra, and they get stuck on simple stuff like this. -2 plus -7 plus 10 because they don't know where they are on the number line in regards to negative and positive numbers. So here's the first operation. We're just doing this part here. Beginning at -2, beginning at -2, and then adding a -7. Negative values are to the left, positive values are to the right. So you know if you add in a negative value, you got to go to the left 7. It says 7 units. Just count 7 times. So if you go to the left 7 times, you get to the number -9. So that's just doing this one operation at a time. You're at -9 now. The next operation is doing that -9 where we are plus 10. So you're going to move 10 units to the right because it's plus and it's a positive value. When you count 10 times to the right, you finish up at +1. Again, this is just using a number line to find out. So this is just all the steps I just said. Start at -2. To add a negative value, move left because your negatives are left. Then to add a positive value like 10, move right 10 times. You end at +1. Use a number line. You don't have to be pretty. It don't have to be perfect when you're drawing all your little tick marks and all. Just make sure you can count accurately when you're doing it. That being said, on the back, I want you to use a number line. You only have to draw one, and then we're going to do two separate problems. First, let's do this one. Use a number line. I know you know what 7 plus -3 is, but show me on a number line. Take about 30 seconds. Again, your number line doesn't have to be pretty, everybody. We're doing this old school like you did when you first started to learn how to add and stuff. It says 7 plus -3. So let's get to the number 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's where we're beginning right there. It says plus a -3. You know your negative numbers are over here. So that means we're going to go to the left 3 times. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. That value right there is -4. -4. Do the same thing with this next one with -8 plus 2. Again, you don't have to be pretty, don't have to be perfect, just the way you can count it accurately. Take about 30 seconds. Okay, there's a quick correction we have to make for A. It's not -4. We're still on the positive side of 0. Remember, 0 is your balance point right there. All your positive numbers are here. Your negative numbers are to the left. That's +4. B says -8 plus 2. Again, on the number line, just get to -8. So -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, you don't have to be perfect. -8 is where you begin. What you do have to know, though, is when you plus 2, you know your plus values or your positive values are that direction. So move 1 time, 2 times, and this one is at -6 because it's on the negative side of 0. So that was just one operation apiece with those two. Let's do one more with two different operations. Use the number line to find the sum. -3 plus -2 plus -3 plus 6. Let's take about 45 seconds on that one. Okay, so here's a basic looking number line right here. I didn't include any numbers, just 0. We need to make sure we can begin at -2. So at -1, -2, this spot right here. That's where it tells you to begin. -2 plus a -3. Plus a negative value, negatives go this way. Negatives are to the left. So we're going to move over 3 times. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. So if that was -2, this is -3, -4. This one's -5. So that's where we're at now, at -5. Then it says plus 6. You know your plus numbers are this direction. So we're going to move 6 times to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got to the positive side of 0, and that's at 1. So your value is 1 when you put all 3 of those together. -2 plus -3 plus 6. And again, most of the time, I don't expect you to draw this out when you're doing the problems, but I need you to visualize it, especially going from positive to negative or negative to positive, to where you don't make very simple mistakes. Here are your rules of addition. Anytime you add two numbers that have the same sign, add their absolute values. Remember what an absolute value is. How far is the number from 0? So 3, its absolute value is 3. -7's absolute value is 7. Okay. You don't use the opposite. You're just using how far is it from 0. Then attach the common sign. So if you had, for example, -2 plus -3, you would add the absolute values 2 plus 3. And then you would attach the common sign and make it -5. So here's your example. -4 plus a -5. Add the absolute values. This one would be 4 plus this one would be 5, and it would give you 9. And then a common sign for both of these is negative. So you have a -9. That's when they have the same sign. Most people are okay with that. The next one is the one people get stuck on, when they have opposite signs. Anytime they have opposite signs, one positive, one negative, subtract the bigger absolute value, subtract the smaller absolute value from the bigger one. So exactly what it says, subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. And then attach the one that has the larger absolute value. Attach its sign. Here's the example that goes with it. 3 plus a -9. 9 is further from 0, so that's your larger absolute value. So you do 9 minus 3, and you get 6. 9 minus 3 is 6. And then since 9 is the higher absolute value, its sign is negative. That's why 6's sign is negative. Same sign, add them up, keep the common sign. Different signs, subtract them, keep the sign that's larger, the larger absolute value. And then we have 4 properties we need to look at. You guys have heard these properties before. You don't use the names of them very often, though. The first one is the commutative property. You can think of this and you can remember which one's which by thinking what the word commute means. If you know people that commute to work, that means they don't live in the same area that they work in. They have to commute. They have to move from one area to the next to go to work. Mathematically, when numbers commute, they move from one area to the other area. So A plus B is the same thing as B plus A. They commuted positions. A was first at the beginning. B was first after the equal sign. 3 plus a negative 2 can commute. Negative 2 can move to the first to be first, and 3 can be second. That's all commutative is. When they move, nothing changes. They just move positions. They move from one spot to the other spot, like people commuting in a car move from one spot to another spot. The associative property. Think of people you associate with. That is your group. Like it or not, that is your social or peer group. Numbers work the same way. They are grouped together by the associative property. So if you have three separate numbers like A, B, and C, before the equal sign, A and B are a group. After the equal sign, B and C are a group. Nothing changed, nothing moved. A, B, and C are still in the same order. There was no commuting that happened. A, B, and C are still in the same order. The only thing that happened is A and B were associated together first. After the equal sign, B and C were associated. So when parentheses move, associative property. When numbers move, commutative property. Most people do okay with those. Negative 5 plus 6 plus 2 is the same thing as negative 5 plus 6 plus 2. Just notice everything's in the same order. Parentheses move from the negative 5 plus 6 to the 6 plus 2. The next two problems, everybody usually does okay with these. The next two are the ones people get confused. The identity property and the property of 0. The identity property, the way you will never mess this one up ever again is if you think of what the number's identity was on one side of the equal sign, A, and what is it when it gets to the other side of the equal sign, A. If its identity doesn't change, if it's exactly the same on the left as it is on the right, it's the identity property. It was negative 4 on the left, if you look at the example. When you add 0 to it, it's still negative 4. Its identity remained unchanged. The reason this is confusing to people is because the name of the next property, the property of 0. Everybody looks at this one and they see the 0 in it, so they think it's got to be the property of 0. That's not it. The identity remains the same. The property of 0 is when you're actually making the number 0 after the equal sign. So a positive A plus a negative A gives you 0. That's the property of 0. Positive 5 plus a negative 5 gives you 0. So that's the way you can determine the difference between those two and not mix them up anymore. If the identity stays exactly the same, identity property. If it becomes 0, property is 0. Here's example number 2, finding a sum. Now we're going to use rules instead of a number line. 2 plus 3 plus 4.7, 2.3 plus 4.7 plus 1.2. Notice the associative property. We're going to use that one. The only reason we're using the associative property, here's the only reason right here. Because what do you get when you put 3 together with 7? What's 3 plus 7? 10. So instead of having a whole bunch of leftover decimals, we're making it simpler to add these and get the number 10, and we'll just carry that 1. So instead of associating 4.7 and 1.2, we're associating 2.3 and 4.7 to where we can get to that nice number 10. Notice that nice number 10 let us carry that 1 over, and 4 plus 2 is 6. When we use that 1 we carried over, it became 7. So then 7 plus 1.2 is going to be 8.2. They're the same sign. You add the absolute values if you need to, and you keep the common sign positive to get 8.2. Here's where it helps a lot when you have fractions. Negative 2/3 plus 6 plus 2/3. The associative property, negative 2/3 and positive 2/3, if we put those two together, instead of putting them together with 6, it's going to make it a whole lot easier. Negative something and positive something, that's just the property of 0 right there when we put those two together. Now we got 6 plus the number 0. And then we know 6 plus 0, anything plus 0 is whatever it was using the identity property. It was 6 You added 0 to it, and it remained 6. Here's another example you can do. Use the properties we just talked about. Try to remember the names of them. Take about 30 seconds. Real simple. You don't need calculators for this. Okay, we got negative 0.7 plus 1.9 plus positive 0.7. The commutative property says that we can move any of this around. This can move to here, and that can move to there. So 1.9 plus negative 0.7 plus 0.7. All we did was commuted those two around. The associative property says that instead of adding 1.9 and 0.7, we can group those two together. 0.7 plus 0.7 is the property of 0. Those two cancel each other out. It leaves us with 1.9 plus 0. Then the identity property, when we put anything together with 0, leaves us with 1.9. That's what I meant about not using calculators. And everything that I wrote up there and everything I said is things that you can do mentally, everybody. You don't have to write all of those steps out once you get comfortable with them. You can look at this and say, okay, well, this is the opposite of this. They cancel each other out, 1.9. But until you can do that, make sure you write the steps the way you feel more comfortable with it. Do the same thing with this one. Take about 30 seconds on this. It should be just as easy. Okay, you can use either the commutative property and move stuff around or the associative property. They'll work the same way. A lot of y'all probably just did this. I'm going to put these two together. Those go together a whole lot better and a whole lot easier than negative 3 goes together with either one of those because of the fractions. They have the same common denominator 3. So the bottom number is going to stay the same. When you add 2 plus 1, you're going to get the number 3. So now we have negative 3 plus that because it's positive. All that says right there is 3 divided by 3, which gives us the number 1. So we have negative 3 plus 1. Now we're adding opposite signs. Remember, when you add opposite signs, you subtract the absolute values. The absolute value of this one is 3 minus the absolute value of this one is 1. 3 minus 1 is 2. And then it says to keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Negative 3 is further away from 0. So 2 is going to become negative 2. So if you didn't use the associative property at the beginning, instead if you use the commutative property, the only thing that would have been different is this would have gone commuted to the back. So now you'd have had minus 3 right here. So let's act like this isn't here anymore. And then when you combine them, you're going to get, instead of having to associate them, you're just going to do this in order. When you combine those two, you get the same 3 over 3. And it would say 3 over 3 minus 3 or plus a negative 3 would be the same thing. And then the checkpoint at the end says to use the rules of addition to find the sum. Okay. Rules of addition right here. Very, very simple. We have opposite signs right here. Positive 1.2 plus negative 8. So since they're opposite, subtract the absolute value of this is 8. It's the larger one, minus the absolute value of this, 1.2. So 8 minus 1.2 is going to be 6.8. And then since 8 is the larger absolute value and it was negative, it'll be negative 6.8. And then let's bring the rest of this down. Plus 2.8. Again, you have opposite signs, one positive, one negative. So take the absolute value of this, 6.8, and subtract the absolute value of this, 2.8. They both have 0.8, so that's nice and neat. It'll be 0. And then 6 minus 2 is 4. And then again, since 6.8 was the higher value and it was negative, it's going to be negative 4. On number 2, it says 3/4 plus 3 plus a negative 3/4. We know we can commute this stuff. We can commute 3/4 to here and make it say plus, since it's positive, 3/4. So now we could act like it's not here anymore. Then our associative property says we can put this together with this. So a positive 3/4 and a negative 3/4, when you put them together, are going to cancel each other out. That's the property of 0. So now we have 3 plus 0 now. And the identity property says when you put those two together, it's 3. Again, using the properties is a whole lot quicker. And I'm talking through and I'm writing steps that you will do mentally once you do this. Whole lot quicker even than taking your calculator out and punching numbers in. It's even quicker than that.